If you're joining for the first time, my name is Tyler, and this is all about having live art Houdini reviews. Sometimes I throw in some industry news. This is also live, so I'm also checking the comments if you guys want to hang out and add in questions or just join along if you'd like. So for today, I don't have too many projects to go over. We're just having maybe like 5 or 6 or so projects, but I just go online, pick things at random, and it gives us a great excuse to talk about renders, what can make them better, what's working well, and trying to just understand the things that work and the things that don't work so that all of us can improve our renders going into the future. So, without further ado, let's check out the first project. This one here is by MGM, and this is using Houdini and Redshift, which looks pretty cool right off the bat. Now, one of the first things I want to bring up here that I like is I like the color palettes. I like how it's monochromatic. For the most part, we have a little bit of this light blue and light violet, but it all kind of feels like it belongs in the same scene. And in my opinion, that's an important thing you need to include with any renders, making sure that your color palettes aren't too disjointed. In other words, it feels like that orb belongs in that sandpit. Now, if we had something like a neon green and we had this, kind of violet thing, it would be a very different render, but it wouldn't feel as cohesive. And so sometimes when I'm looking at 3D projects, I'll notice that we have this bright green thing, a red thing here, and just random colors happening. So one of the first things I'll say is that it just seems like this color palette is intentional and it feels like everything belongs together, which I think is a good thing to have. Now, as far as the VFX itself goes, I also like what's happening here as well. Any effect that changes over time is going to create a narrative. In other words, we have these waves going out, and then we progress right here to the second part of it where turbulent noise takes over and it kind of flings all the particles everywhere. And so another thing that's great is again just the narrative, the storytelling, the fact that we have different phases of things happening. That sort of thing is a really good quality to have as well in all your simulations. Now, as far as something that I think could improve this, we do have, I think, a rather abrupt, transition from the waves going into that turbulent noise. So I think that in this situation, if I was to try to improve this, I would say one of two things. Either gradually bring in that turbulent noise so it's not just an on and off switch that just turns on, or what you can do is you can have the transition occur not everywhere at once, but kind of at one part of the frame and then gradually wipe over to the other part of the frame. So anything to kind of gradually introduce the second phase of this, I think is a really cool idea. But anyway, aesthetically, I think it's great. This would be an awesome exercise for you guys to try out. It's a really pretty render. And as far as abstract Houdini effects goes, I think this is pretty successful. And so great job there, MGM. All right. Well, we have another thing here. This is by Radha. And it looks like we have some Vellum happening with this one. I can't maximize this because it's a GIF, but we can just kind of take a look at this. Yeah, so this one is all about fruit. Remember to always drink fresh fruit. uh, yeah, so the thing about this is, well, first of all, let's talk about the simulation a little bit. I think it's an interesting idea having some fruit just kind of jammed into this. I like the little logo that's dancing up and down. It kind of gives it a fun feeling to it. The only thing that for me isn't quite working is we have this really playful up and down kind of bobble thing with that logo. And then when we go to the actual fruit, it almost looks like it's not a very ripe fruit. We don't have any subsurface scattering going on. And so this feels like plastic kind of dark plastic fruits that are being deformed. And so that to me almost has not really like a fun, playful thing going on, but more of a, I'm not going to say disturbing, but it's more of a rotten fruit kind of thing going on. And so I'm not sure if that irony is intentional, but at first glance, that's kind of what I had the impression of. Like we have this contrast between fun, play, fun, playful little sticker, and then, this kind of disturbing looking fruit or mushrooms. Yeah, that's actually a good one here. Um, yeah. So it almost has like that kind of feel, like a fungi or a mushroom or something like that. And so anyway, I guess the bottom line is either that contrast is intentional, in which case, if you're trying to make that sarcastic, then you need to maybe push that fruit to even look more disturbing or disgusting, and then make that sticker look more bright or something. Or you go the other route, which is you make the fruit look more lively and playful, and that follows more of the theme that we have with this friendly, bouncing little fruit sticker going on. So anyway, I think that's just something to keep in mind. This happens, by the way, when you have vellum and you have it kind of like these balloon squishy objects, right? It can almost give a disturbing or an uncomfortable feel to a lot of things. I don't know if you guys have seen like people take an anvil or something heavy and make it into like a squishy vellum thing, but it almost makes you uncomfortable when you see that. And so it kind of goes in that category of disturbing art, if you will, which is not a bad thing, but it's just a stylistic thing that you should totally be aware of. Other than that, I think that this is an interesting project. I think that you know it's unique in that I've never seen it before, which is great. And yeah, so thanks for sharing and great job there, Radha. All right. Well, speaking of Vellum, we have another one. Looks like Radha also posted another one here. We won't spend too much time on it, but it looks like this is more Vellum experiments that are happening right here. And so I remember making something similar at one point. I think this is what you get when you increase the rest length of the internal vellum constraints. I think it gives you this kind of brain looking thing. And then you can just take the rest constraints or the vellum constraints, the rest length, and just animate where that goes along the sphere. So I think that's what's happening here. But yeah, it gives you this cool like little folding brain look, if you will, which is a cool little exercise. So yeah, this is really cool. I like that we have multiple camera shots. I think that also adds a lot. And yeah, I think this is a cool little experiment as well. All right, so this next one here is by Laura G. And this was some hair that was done for Death, Love, and Robots, or Love, Death, and Robots, that is. And this was Houdini hair. I think that this honestly looks fantastic. And I believe if we scroll down, we might be able to see this kind of flicking around. Yeah, check out this animation right here. And so there's a lot of things I think we can learn from this because this is really well done, in my opinion, just overall. But one thing right away is that the animation is not over the top. And sometimes I think that's a temptation that we have as CG artists to make things flow more or to make them exaggerate more because when we see it in CG, it looks novel, it looks different and cool. But if we're really going for realism, this to me feels like realistic hair motion. It's not as drastic as the default settings might have it be, or it's not just flying everywhere and whatnot. So I think that that's one good thing to recognize, that just little subtleties goes a very long way when you're trying to make the animation happen with hair. That's really cool. The final render looks fantastic. The character work for this is incredible. And so, yeah, it looks like as well, we might have had some scans happen right here. We also have different layers on the shading. So we have some hair And then we have the hair dirt. And again, kind of subtle, difficult to see. Um, but with the hair dirt, it's just thinking about that extra layer of detail that other people aren't thinking of. And in general in CG, when it's really all about quality. So if you can think about details and include that where other people do not, then that gives you, I think, a really good edge. And if you keep doing that over and over and over again, that's when you start reaching these kind of professional looking results. So yeah, overall, I think that this is fantastic. I suppose if I was to get picky about this, I do think that according to this turntable, the hair just feels a little bit too perfect, a little bit too specular. I know that there was some dirt added on here, but honestly, I think that we could see a bit more dirt here as well, just because I think it's just a little bit too shiny for my personal taste. And for this character, it seems like this character is kind of in a, dusty, dirty looking environment, and it wouldn't be that shiny. Now, mind you, that this is also a turntable for a studio rig, so it might be exaggerated because of that. But even here, I think that going a little bit heavier on that dirt, or at least turning down the specular highlights, would be a good thing to have. But obviously, this is fantastic. Great job, Laura. And yeah, really awesome stuff. Okay, so this next one here is by Andre, and this is using Vellum to reveal something. Let's see. We have like a giant building or a light fixture of some kind. So, what can we say about this? Excuse me. Well, first thing is that this feels big. And why does this feel like a large cloth falling, would you say? I think it's because we have the animation occurring slowly. And if you were to take the default settings and just run it with the cloth falling off, it would fall off instantly. It would just go zook. And so I think a lot of effort was placed here in trying to get the right timing of how slowly things would actually fall if you were looking at this from a distance. And so, we always talk about how to make things big or how to make things feel small in, your projects. And this is a great example of making something feel big by having that cloth slowly fall down instead of just rolling with the default settings and it just kind of, goes down like that. Yeah, so as far as things to improve this, I definitely think that it might be cooler to release this kind of gradually over time. So you start on the left, and it's almost like you unhook from the left, and then you go bam, 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 going to the right. Something like that, almost like you're revealing something, would be kind of interesting. I imagine that if this was like a big building reveal of some kind, that they would probably do that. They would, unattach the first one, and then you'd see the second, third, fourth. We do have a little bit of a delay right here, but I would just like to see more contrast in that. I think it would make it more interesting in this case. So there's that. I think that's one thing. If we take a look as well at what we're trying to see here, we actually don't know what this is until we see right around the top section where the building, right about here, where the building shows up. And so another thing that you might want to consider is just removing a layer or two of scaffolding so that you can identify the object sooner as these things fall down. Because again, I think it's one of those things where if you don't know what it is at first, you want to know what it is quickly so that you don't lose people's attention. Usually in a shot, you want to identify what's happening fairly quickly, usually. And so this, because we had the cloth falling down slowly, which is good, we don't actually get to identify this right away. So that's another thing to kind of think about as you're planning out this kind of shot. But all in all, I think it's pretty cool. It has this kind of moody vibe with the dark colors in the background there. And yeah, I think it's a cool project. All right, this here is from Ginger Prince, aka Tyler. Well, nice to meet you, Tyler. Um, yeah, thanks for checking out my work. Sounds like you're in the early days of learning Houdini and will be taking a Rebel Way course later this year. Well, yeah, welcome to Houdini. I think that's fantastic. And yeah, stick with it. It's a lot of fun. I think that first hill, that first learning journey is challenging at first, but if you can get into it and start finding the topics that you're passionate about, Houdini has a lot of fun things to explore, and it can get really cool the more you invest into it. So I hope that your journey goes well, and let me know if you need anything along the way. All right, cool. So this here now is Crystal Growth 2.0 from Jason Lynn. Let's check it out. All right, so we have this kind of thing happening. So, first thing I'll say, I like the colors. We have different colors going on. I think that's pretty sweet. I think that, we're using a noise here to grow this out, which is cool. Um, yeah, and I think that this is a really, and also I like the rock that you use right here. We have this nice textured rock. I think the camera movement's interesting. It's kind of, turning around this thing, or it's doing this epic pan upwards, which is really nice. And we also have the backdrop here with this kind of subtle gray happening as well. So kind of going with that monochromatic, not trying to, you know, have our color palette wildly swinging everywhere. Um, but that creates a lot of contrast when these crystals show up because these are neon, they're bright, and it definitely puts your eye right there when these things grow, which makes them pop. Also, I like the fact that we have some emission. We could see that glowing on the rock underneath there. I think that's a really nice touch. So, as far as things to improve this, one thing to think about with crystals is that you'll probably never really see a crystal this perfect on the inside. They usually have little cracks or dents or little chips on the outside that refracts the light differently. And so I suppose one thing that would take this to the next level is adding in that extra detail. And one way you can do that is just making a few different varieties of crystals with all that nice detail in there. You could take some planes and Boolean things out so that the light bends differently. Um, and then you can instance that onto the copy to points so that you have these different variants showing up. So that's one thing. I would also say that the distribution is fairly even. We have a scatter node, and we could see all these little crystals right here, but everything is very even. So if you were to cut out some of these points and make the distribution different, I think that would also be interesting. Most things aren't going to be uniform like that, so you want to try to make this as organic as possible. And another way that you might be able to incorporate that organic shape is by having some kind of image being used for masking where the points go. So in other words, you can take a attribute for map, let's say, and just have like a marble texture on it. And then that will give you interesting patterns from that marble texture that then you can use to distribute the points. So you're taking advantage of organic shapes that happen in the real world and then using that for the distribution here. And I think that would also add another level of detail to this. That would be really cool. Another thing as well is that you could try offsetting the growth on a per point basis with these crystals. So in other words, instead of this entire section uniformly going up, you could have the crystals in that section going up at different rates. And so I think that would also be another interesting thing to add in and just play with here in this situation. But I think that this is a cool project. It looks like a lot of fun. It looks like you had a lot of fun with this, Jason. So congrats with that and great job. All right, so I think we have one more here. This is by Andre as well. And this is just a really cool project, a really cool idea that I found. We have a Pyro simulation. Let's turn off the volume there. we have a Pyro simulation that is advecting these different curves or these different cloth strings with some sparks going up in the air. So I think this is just really cool in general. I love the integration with the backplate here as well. I think that's working pretty nicely. And I suppose the only thing I would add to this is maybe having something different occurring with the lighting. Like, what if you had some kind of like emissive sphere in the middle that this flame could interact with, or something of that sort? I think that that would be kind of interesting. It just, I mean, it looks like fire because of the movements, but it doesn't look like fire just due to the lighting and how bright everything is. And so I think if you wanted to play around with that, that would be a nice addition to this piece as well. But really cool idea, great concept, and yeah, I'm a fan of this whole thing. So well done. Okay, everyone, that about does it for today. As far as what I'm doing at CG Forge, I'm still working on the Vellum course. I've been really busy with mentorships lately as well, so that's been taking a lot of time. But between mentorships and the Vellum course, that's what's on the docket with CG Forge. And besides that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day and good luck with your Houdini projects this month. I'll see you next time.